Welcome to Learn the Word, the daily Bible teaching program of Calvary Chapel of Delta, and Pastor Doug McLean. Today, we're joining Pastor Doug in Matthew chapter 8 for the message Discipleship. So if you're not driving, grab your Bible and open up to Matthew 8:18 as we begin.
The day before had been a long day of miraculous ministry as Jesus did some amazing miracles, healings that demonstrated his ability, his authority, his compassion, and his superiority. By doing so, he gave the people of Capernaum a foretaste of the kingdom, experiences that pointed to the day when there will be no more pain, no crying, no sickness, no evil, no devil, and no death. But to bring an end to human suffering, Jesus would need to deal with the root cause, which is man's sin, the original sin. And that was his main mission, to come to suffer in our stead, to suffer the penalty that our sins demand. And that's what Matthew pointed to in verse 17 of Matthew chapter 8 when he quoted from Isaiah 53. Now, no doubt, Jesus doing miracles helped people greatly. It changed their lives dramatically. It gave them great hope. But the miracles supported his greater ministry and were done as signs to point to his identity and his plan. In fact, if his primary ministry was to miraculously heal and cast down demons, if his primary ministry was to relieve as much human suffering as possible, if that was the limit of his ministry, then it would have made sense to see as many people as possible and to continue ministering to the multitudes however possible. But there were greater things going on than the temporary relief that came through his miraculous ministry. Remember, all healings are temporary. They all are. Because all the people that were healed in the Gospels eventually died. His miracles said something, communicated truth, delivered a message, pointed to his identity and his plan. And sometimes the best context of that was not with the crowd. And that's why we see in verse 18, it says, "And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side." So he didn't say, okay, the crowds are coming, guys. We need to find a more efficient way to reach more people. Nope. He said, guys, the crowds are coming. It's time to go. It's time to go to the other side. And we'll see why before we're done today. So he gave a command. He didn't throw out an idea. Hey, guys, I kind of have an idea. He didn't give a suggestion. He gave orders. And he issued a command to go to the other side, to the eastern shore of the lake. So it was time for them to take this 7-mile journey to an area that was connected with the Decapolis, a group of Hellenistic cities that very much looked like you could pull them out of Europe and plop them down in the Middle East. It's amazing to see the archaeological ruins today. Populated that area mainly with Gentiles. So as they were heading to the shore, clearly leaving the area, we're told in verse 19, "Then a certain scribe came and said to him, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.'" Now, remember, the scribes were the religious scholars of the day, and most, as you read through the Gospels, were skeptical opponents of Jesus. So to have a scribe come to Jesus and say, "I will follow you wherever you go," not just to the other side, but wherever you go, I'm with you. That's super significant. And for many a man, that would have been a very appealing offer. To have a scribe, a religious scholar among you, wanting to follow you. But take note how Jesus answered. Verse 20, Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Listen, Jesus was making it clear that following him would have a cost. And you need to count the cost if you want to follow. He said, a fox has a hole, and he's happy with his hole. And birds have nests, and they're perfectly content with their nests. They're foxes and the birds, they're just kind of happy here. They're comfortable here. They have a home here. But Jesus said, I have no place to rest here. And he didn't. He didn't have any place of his own to rest here. At this point, Jesus was homeless. He moved from place to place and at times would stay with friends. Read through the gospel, you'll see it. And what he's saying to the scribe is, if you follow me, well, you're going to be homeless too. It would be uncomfortable. You see, following Jesus, making that decision to follow him, might mean that you have nothing here. And you need to know that. Following Jesus may mean that you have no place to rest here. You have nothing. Following Jesus may be uncomfortable. Following Jesus doesn't lead to material wealth or success in this age. And Jesus wanted this man to know it, to weigh it out, and to decide for himself. What's fascinating is that this is the first time in Matthew's gospel, out of 81 times in the gospels, that Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. Little detail, you can read through it quickly. Very first time where he says the Son of Man has, and then in this context, no place to lay his head. And the reason I say that's interesting is because the Son of Man is a title that comes from Daniel chapter 7, a title for the Messiah. And if you listen to the context of that usage, Daniel 7, 13 and 14, this becomes just a fascinating lesson. Daniel 7, 13 and 14, Daniel said, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. You see, by using this title, Son of Man, Jesus was calling this scribe to make a decision of faith. The scribe would know it for sure. You see, if he is ultimately the Son of Man, as he identified himself here, then ultimately in the end, he'll have a kingdom from the Father, and he'll rule over all eternally. So presently, following Jesus might mean you have nothing. But ultimately, if he's the Son of Man, he'll have everything, and you'll enjoy it with him. Revelation 21:7. Revelation 21:7, he who overcomes, and we overcome by faith, shall inherit all things. And I will be his God, and he shall be my son. So listen, following Jesus may be uncomfortable in this age. It may result in you losing everything, having nothing. There's no promise for earthly wealth and prosperity here. But following Jesus by faith is believing in the eternal kingdom and having the assurance of eternal riches in glory. So you have to count the cost. Is it worth it? Do you believe in who he is? And then you make the decision. Verse 21 then says, then another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Notice another one, a different, heteros, two words for another in the Greek New Testament. Allos is another of the same kind. Heteros is another of a different kind. Here is another one, a different disciple other than the scribe, which means he's a man that's already been learning from Jesus. And when he saw Jesus and the others headed to the shore, this one says, I want to go, but I have something I need to do first. Now, when he said, let me first go and bury my father, it was not likely that his father died earlier that day and he was asking permission to go and bury him. It could have been, but it would have been very unlikely. And I say that because in that day, in their culture, the Jewish culture, the day that you died, you were buried. So that isn't the likely situation. It's more likely that his father was getting older, and this was kind of an idiomatic way of saying, I want to hang out till my dad gets older. I want to honor him and help him through this season of life. And then when he passes, then when he is not around anymore, then I'll come and follow. So, Master, let me first go and bury my father, wrap that all up, and then I'll come and follow you. Now, Jesus' answer might seem kind of tough. Look at verse 22. Jesus said to him, follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, if Jesus is Lord, as this man confessed, Lord, let me, then following him has to take precedence over everything else. By definition, if he's Lord, he's master, then you follow him regardless of the circumstance. So if he's Lord, you have to drop that, let me first. That's a contradiction to say, Lord, let me first. You got to drop that. You can't truly say those two things together. If Jesus is Lord, then he'll be first. Now, when he said, let the dead bury their own dead, he was likely communicating that burying the dead can be done by anyone, even the spiritually dead. You know, if he's saying that dead can bury, he's talking about those that aren't physically dead, but those who are spiritually dead. As Ephesians 2:1, by the way, Ephesians 2:1 describes us before we became alive. You and I were dead in our trespasses and sins. So burying the dead doesn't require spiritual life. Anybody can do that. Now look, don't get this wrong. We know that Jesus showed up at 2 funerals, at least in Scripture. 2 of them we know. Luke 7, John chapter 11. Luke 7, the funeral of the only son of a widow, and John 11, of course, going to the tomb of his friend Lazarus. Both of those experiences were radical. Both of those times, the men were raised from the dead. So, listen, the lesson that's illustrated by this occurrence is that if you want to follow Jesus, he has to be first. If you want to be with Jesus, if you want to be a part of what he's doing, you can't just follow when it's convenient. You can't just follow when it fits within your life situations. You can't say, let me first, if he's Lord. You can't say, well, you know, when I get finished school, then I'll follow Jesus. When the sports season is over, I'll follow Jesus. When I get a new job, I'll follow Jesus. When I retire, I'll follow Jesus. After we move, I'll follow Jesus. When I finish raising my kids, I'll follow Jesus. Jesus is saying, no, that you can't allow life situations to determine your level of commitment to Christ. You can't allow life situations to determine your commitment level to Christ. If he's Lord, then he determines that level. So if he's Lord, then you follow whenever and wherever he leads. So this was the opportunity for this man to go along with Jesus and to be a part of what happened next. He had to choose. Nobody was forcing him. And likewise, you get to choose. And it's interesting when you look at this, did he go? We don't know. We're not told. But what we are told is what those who did go got to experience, and therefore what he missed. He didn't go, so he missed what we read about next. Look at verse 23. Now, when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. So that's what disciples do. You might want to underline on that, followed him. That's what disciples do, is they follow Jesus. Now, he had already given the command back in verse 18. Here he took the lead, and they were simply being obedient followers. They were where? Listen, they were where they were supposed to be. I just want to settle that. They were absolutely where they were supposed to be. He said, go to the other side. He got into the boat. They followed him. They were absolutely where they were supposed to be. And that's important because of what happened next. Verse 24. And suddenly, a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. Now, the Sea of Galilee is 7 miles wide at its widest point, a little over 7 miles wide, east to west, 13 miles north to south. The lowest freshwater lake in the world, 690 feet. The surface of the Sea of Galilee is 690 feet below sea level. It's about 140 feet deep at its deepest point. And when you're out on it, you look around and you see mountains that surround it, particularly in the northern end. You feel like you're in a bowl. And there is a very defined gorge that comes through near Magdala, Mount Arbel. And sometimes if the wind's just blowing right, the wind from the Mediterranean will come through that gorge. Or the wind from Mount Hermon, which is almost 10,000 feet above sea level, will descend. The cold air descends. Now you have a subtropical climate down on the Sea of Galilee, and you have that hot air there rising. You have the cool air coming either from the sea or from Mount Hermon descending. And at times, you can have high winds and storms and sudden dangerous squalls that occur. In fact, the most recent huge one was May 14th and 15th, 2022, where strong winds blew in and they had gusts up to 87 miles an hour. It's fascinating. You can go online and you can see videos of this. They had flooding. They had intense damage to the promenade down in Tiberias. Those of you that have gone with us to Israel before, there's this nice walk along Tiberias with metal rails and like a ceramic tile concrete walkway. And this storm came in and just ripped the rails off, blew the tiles off, did a lot of damage. They've observed waves 8 to 10 feet, and it's just an amazing storm that came through. Now, the typical boats were not that large. In fact, they found a first century fishing boat in the mud there, miraculously preserved. They're able to maintain it. It's 27 feet long, not very shallow draft comparatively. And we know that the ships weren't like our ships that would be out on the bay. Just an open fishing boat so that men could work and pull their nets in. Wasn't really made to handle heavy seas. Now, remember also we know from Matthew 4, 18 to 22, at least 4 of the disciples were experienced fishermen. Matthew 4, 18 to 22. Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And here's the storm that comes in, and we know they can have big storms, but this one is unusual. It's called a great tempest, great storm, and it was sudden. And they were being covered by the waves. The waves were just breaking over the boat. It was filling with water. They were bailing and rowing and working and just trying to keep the boat afloat, trying to survive. In the meantime, Jesus is sleeping. Now, just practical observation, this tells us that following Jesus, obeying Jesus, can lead into storms. Remember, the disciples were where they were supposed to be. They obeyed, they followed Jesus' lead, and where did they end up? In a storm. Jonah was in a different kind of storm. Jonah was in a storm brought by the Lord as discipline when he was fleeing from the Lord. And sometimes storms of correction can happen. But this storm, not discipline at all. The disciples were in the right place, following Jesus' commands, following his example. In fact, if they didn't listen, if they didn't obey, they wouldn't have been in the storm. So they're in the storm, and eventually they came to a place where they decided they needed to wake Jesus up. Verse 25, then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us. We are perishing. So from their experience, they thought they were going down. They thought they were going to be destroyed or ruined. They said to him, "We're going to die. Save us." Now, that means they were coming to Jesus thinking that he could do something about their situation, which is an amazing thing. They were thinking that Jesus could rescue them, he could deliver them, he could do for them what they were convinced they couldn't do for themselves. And again, at least 4 seasoned fishermen, they're at a place where this is too much for us, and they come to Jesus and they say, "Jesus, save us." And keep in mind, at this point, they had no experience with Jesus working to change the weather or any specific evidence that he could calm storms. Look, they never were in this situation before. They never read the story before. But just from being with him when he was healing and casting out demons, they knew he had abilities far greater than their own. And so they had this urgent prayer meeting and they said, "Lord, save us. We're perishing." Verse 26, "But he said to them, 'Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?' And then he arose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm." Now, notice before he calmed the storms, he spoke to the disciples. So he prioritized speaking to them over changing their circumstances or giving them any relief in their circumstances. He prioritized speaking to them. And he didn't say, "You guys don't have any faith." They had faith. That's why they got on the boat. And not only is that why they got on the boat, but that's why they came to him and woke him up and said, "Lord, save us, we're perishing," because they did have faith. To understand, having faith is what led them to this point. The issue is they had fear because their faith was lacking. So they had begun to reason. They were rationally observing their circumstances. They were processing everything through their experience, and they concluded through their own understanding, we're going to die. If something doesn't happen, we're going to die. They were fearful because they were not trusting as they could have or as they should have. They were lacking in their trust or their confidence in him. Again, think about it. Did he command them to depart to the other side? Yes. Did he get in the boat with them? Yes. Was he sleeping? Yes. So faith would say, I know he loves us. I know he told us we're going to the other side. I know he knows what he's doing. I know his will is best. I know he's able to do amazing things and he's sleeping. And so the conclusion by faith would result in overcoming fear, overcoming their panic. See, faith would have made them confident to rest in the storm. And that's one of the reasons that Jesus had them get into this boat to start their journey. You see, this journey would be an opportunity for their faith to grow. Because sometimes it takes being in a situation, I would say more than often, it takes being in a situation that is beyond you to see if you really trust the Lord and to see how much you trust the Lord. You see, it's very easy for us to say we trust you, Lord, when everything's going well. Anybody can say that. And when you're beyond yourself, and whatever that situation is, that's when you get to see if you trust the Lord and how much you trust the Lord. 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7. 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7. In this you greatly rejoice, that though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. See, trials refine your faith. Not only showing you your lack of faith, but also giving you opportunities to grow in faith. You see, if they weren't in the storm, they would have never learned that Jesus can calm storms. Likewise, if you always have enough to pay your bills, then you may never, ever experience Jesus as your provider. If you're always healthy, you may never see Jesus as your healer or your comforter. If you're never in a dilemma you can't figure out, you may never see him as the one with all wisdom and knowledge. If you never suffer, if you never deal with loss, then you might not ever discover him to be your supernatural comforter. See, there are things that you can only learn in storms.
You've been listening to the message Discipleship from Matthew chapter 8. If you'd like to hear this message again or listen to more from Pastor Doug, you can find it on the official Calvary Chapel of Delta mobile app. Just search for CC Delta in your app store to download it today. And be sure to join us next time to continue to learn the Word.